Hello, Beth.
We are here.
We
You're using your, do you want me to use my background?
No, you don't have to. It's only because I have a bigger mess behind me than you do you.
Just have a mirror up. I mean, I can do it if you want us to.
No, I like I said, there was only one reason. It was just because, oh wow, this place is a pit. No, it's totally up to you because I was really just trying to just hide stuff. So
I actually had it up and then I took it down.
And we're recording. Okay. So welcome to HP Live. I'm Shelley Mallman. I'm the Director of Marketing and Outreach at Heritage Pointe. And it's another monthly broadcast of HP Live, which is an opportunity for fans of Heritage Pointe to get together and see how we're all doing virtually. And it feels like it's been forever since we've all been together in real life, but hope it won't be too much longer because we, all of the staff and the residents are getting their first dosage of the vaccine tomorrow. So we're celebrating this week. And we're also celebrating this week because it's going to be Tu B'Shvat at the end of the week. It's the birthday of the trees. So if in the next hour you are watching and you like what you're seeing, or if you just want to support Heritage Pointe during the pandemic, you can just text the word trees to 345-345. And I thank you for all of your support. I'd like to introduce Beth Slavin, who's the Director of Philanthropy at Heritage Pointe.
Thank you, Shelley. And before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to welcome our residents at Heritage Pointe who are joining us on our in-house television channel. I'd also like to thank our board members, our Diamond Donor members, our family of friends members and community members who are joining us today for these wonderful programs. Heritage Pointe is pleased to present its third HP Live Collaborative Educational Arts Program today with Professor Patty Seyburn. Professor Seyburn earned a BS and an MS in journalism from Northwestern University, an MFA in poetry from the University of California at Irvine, and a PH.D. in poetry and literature from the University of Houston. She is currently a professor at California State University at Long Beach. Patty Seyburn has published 5 collections of poems: Threshold Delivery, Perfecta, Hilarity, Mechanical Cluster, and Diasporadic. And on a personal note, Patty and I have the distinct pleasure of being 2 Motown girls from Detroit. Our paths did not cross until we both arrived in California and met at our congregation, Temple Bat Yam, which she is a past president. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Professor Patty Seyburn, who will present Being a Jewish Poet, Modern and Ancient Influences on Love, Loss, and Nosh. Thanks, Patty.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you guys for having me. It's great to be here. It's great to, great to see you all, and lovely way to spend Sunday afternoon. I'm going to spend most of my time reading poems that have a Jewish theme or Jewish references that you will hear, and I'll do a little bit of explanation. And you'll see how much I think, I'm essentially an academic poet. I mean, I teach in the academy and I publish, but it's always interesting to me how much Judaism has informed my work. Sometimes the references are overt and sometimes they're more subtle. But it seems to me to underpin everything. So the selection of poems I'm going to read for you today is from a little bit from each of my 5 books, and then a few new poems. And I will try to explain a little bit of context if I think it's necessary, and take questions afterwards if you have any questions. So this is from my first book, which is called Diasporadic. I'm holding it up. And it's there's a picture of the bridge between Detroit and Canada called the Ambassador Bridge on the cover of this book, which is a bridge I used to go over often as a child, because Detroiters migrate between downtown and Windsor, which is right over the border, with some frequency. This is called Lowercase. I caught a glimpse of God inside the pecan tree out back. It's hard to tell, but you get used to the signs. Leave that tree alone, I said. He shook a low branch. An unripe pecan fell. Now look what you've done, I said. Now you've done it. He shrugged. This has been going on for a while. Yesterday, I found him under the divan. I chided him. You can't hide forever. Watch me, he said. I told him, I don't like you looking at my feet. No answer. I'm going to mop with ammonia. Then I did. At first, I had a few questions, the big ones and smaller ones. Why peppermint and spearmint? Earlobes, lichen, killer bees. He spent last week sitting on our porch on the wooden swing with the rusty chain, smoking. I know, he said. Just one. Fine, I said. Kill yourself. Who would know? He snubbed it out and tossed the butt into a clump of brambles with 1,000 other butts. Sometimes he disappears for days, for weeks. I know enough not to scold or praise his return. I let myself say, you could call. I say, why don't you make yourself useful? He says, I have no skills. I flunked the temp typing test. Computers confuse me. And filing, I shouldn't have to do. I tell him, be a paperclip, a staple. People always run out. He's a whiz, however, at the New York Times crossword. He knows that Urs is Gaelic, the length of the Nile, and all the synonyms for zenith. And he doesn't ask much. The odd hard-boiled egg, a nice piece of whitefish boned, a tomato on the cusp of ripeness. You like that? I ask. He nods, approval, chews slowly, quietly, not wanting to intrude. At times, I hardly know he's there. So, you know, what you're hearing in that poem is obviously the poet's conversation with a very accessible God, you know, trying to sort of make some sort of connection, but also imply the difficulty and the challenges of the relationship, you know, and the implication of how do we know of God's existence? So that was a poem from my first book, Diasporadic. I'm going to actually move to my most recent book, which is called Threshold Delivery. On the cover of this is a painting by a friend of mine named Mario Muller, and the painting is of Hedy Lamarr. And it's sort of an interesting story for me. I was looking for a cover for this painting, and I spoke with my friend Mario. It's nice to have a painter friend. I've known him for 35 years. And he said, you know, I have this series of Hollywood women. Why don't you look through them? And I looked through and I said, oh, who's that? And he said, that's Hedy Lamarr. And I said, you know, people used to always tell my mother was born in 1922 and she had jet black hair. She used to tell me that people told her she looked like Hedy Lamarr. So I knew that was sort of a sign. And I said, can I put that painting on the cover? So this is what that looks like. So I did. The poem, I want to read just two poems from this collection. The first one is called Scena Smole, which is Latin for pepper tree. And you've seen these pepper trees in Southern California. They're round and gorgeous. They're sort of like bamboo. They grow like crazy. You know, they're very, they're a voracious tree. And this is a poem. There's one reference just to remind you of the word pardes, which we inaccurately translate as paradise from the Garden of Eden. And it actually apparently means a grove. I had an Israeli tell me this maybe after I'd read this poem 50 times at readings, and it was in Huntington Beach, and a very nice man raised his hand and said, oh, I like the poem very much, but I do need to tell you, it actually means more of a grove. And we think of that as that garden, the big garden with a big G, Garden of Eden. Even so I stand corrected, but I am referencing the grove that we think of as the Garden of Eden. Sheena Smoley. One more thing, there's a little reference to Robert Frost at the end, one of our great poets, of course, an inaugural poet, the inaugural poet for JFK. Sheena Smoley. The pepper tree looked like a child drew it with a compass, wheel round in green, not moss or hunter, jade or forest, teal or camouflage, a green describing nothing else, defining more state of mind than hue. The man atop the hill, concerned about his view, came down the hill, as rich people sometimes do. This was his due, he pointed out, according to the rules the neighborhood association, shades of something sinister, prescribes for how to keep the peace when interests compete. I like the peace. I like competing too. I like my pepper tree, the shape it carved out of the blue. Admittedly, it rose above the meeting of our lot lines, intruding on his vision of a slice of somewhere he has never gone, but only slightly. In lieu of all horizon, as if anyone can take it in its entirety. He'd see a swath of bright green, white flowers in the summer, rosy berries in the fall, pardesse, I think, alongside sky, the empty infinite, the endlessness his property entitles him to. As for my lot, I'd like some privacy. I want the pepper tree, not him, to watch me rattle off my spells, concoct my brew, and I'll admit to an old school affection, beauty. Would he know it if he saw it? Said Justice Stewart of obscenity. The branches crash upon my ivy and a stump remains, pale revenant, a few anemic limbs. I know the hired men don't mean to give offense. I don't shake my fist at them, but at the ornamental iron now revealed. If it were post or picket, would I mind as much? I am fenced in, fenced out, pissed off, and still the chainsaw serenades me with its roars and pauses. The hummingbirds displace, distress their feverish flights to find another home. I will not move, though my impermanence is not in doubt. I read the fragile branches give their water to the leaves, allow themselves to hollow out, be snapped by coastal winds. Such sacrifice. Would altruism move him? I want the man atop the hill to see the view he craves is best when glimpsed, a happy accident, instead of present on display. And so there must be leaves and branches to see through. Frost's protean voice murmurs in my ear. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me. But all he knows is what he's bought. Tonight, the darkness comes a little closer, and he has bought the absence of a tree. The one other poem I'd like to read from this book is an homage to my mother and to bingo. I thought I should read a bingo poem. It's my only bingo poem. As Beth referenced, I grew up at a synagogue called Temple Israel in Detroit. And they would have a giant bingo night. It was a huge synagogue, huge Reform synagogue. And they had, and I, was a child and stayed at home, and my parents went. It was a social event. And apparently my mother won something called the Losers Bingo, which this gets described in this poem. You basically, you win if you are the last person to have had bingo, and then you win. So that's seems like a good metaphor, right? Losers Bingo. There she was, after all the numbers had been called and found their homes in straight lines on players' cards. Across, down, diagonal, voted most likely to elude the eye that likes a box. When all else took their seats, sighing at irony, she remained on her feet, no more than 4 chips in a row, no loud pairing of integers and letters declared, no respite for the winner, success entering through the cellar door near the furnace. She brought home her prizes in a vast cardboard box, pink gingham double-fitted sheet sheathed in plastic, 3 placemats, note paper with sayings determined to inspire, a small appliance, and more mismatched stray items undeniably fit and ready for use. And we used all of it because we knew that luck didn't knock every day. And in a fight, you need to be the last one standing. My mother was not of blessed memory, was not physically tough, but you'd want her in a bar fight. So, I mean, she was tough in all good ways, in all good ways. I'm going to move to my a couple poems from my third book, which is called Hilarity. I always say it's my least funny book, even though it is called Hilarity. And this poem is for my daughter. It's called Brachot, a catalog. And as you know, I'm sure brachot are blessings. You know, when speaking with our rabbi at some point, he said, you know, and we also know this from Fiddler on the Roof, right? There's a blessing for everything, right? Isn't that the rabbis in Fiddler on the Roof say there's a blessing for everything? And then that wonderful blessing for the czar, may God keep the czar far away from us. So this is actually a poem sort of about that blessing for everything, but it is for my daughter and for when she was written when she was a baby. Brachot, a catalog for Sydney. One for grass, field of sighs, one perfect pitch, voices veil, clocks, sun's ascent, demise, you name it, blessed, wholesale. One for bringing me to this day should not be repeated for the same event, but once in 30 days, attrition by repetition, when I always thought the strategy of prayer accretion. Since you cannot form the sounds for the soul's return to the body, I will, including your thanks for middle and index fingers, which sate you until the hunger says, cry out in perfect pitch, innate to infants. All, cry out. How loud the finches, a regular friars club meeting, a 10-hen party. I have told you that birds say chirp and tweet. Please understand, I am a poor translator, living off one flat ear while the other berates the past in triple meter. Counterpoint of Cossacks on horseback, fields of conscience underfoot. I am incapable even of mimicking you, mimicking me. So we wait for the lift in Babel's lobby. Our speech will never grow less confounded than on this day, Yom Zeh, today, to which we have been brought. The why, I do not know. This poem will rhyme. So if you've been craving a rhyme, you can exhale now. Oh, it's going to sound like a poem. Yay. So it's you wouldn't be the first. See Scott Siegel saying, oh, thank God, Patty. All right. Phew. This is called What I Disliked About the Pleistocene Era. The pastries were awfully dry, an absence of hummingbirds, of any humming, and birds' feathers made it difficult to fly. Clouds had not yet learned to clot, billow, represent. Stars unshot, anonymous, moon and sun indifferent. No one owned a house, a pond, a rock on which to rest your head, no ark, no here then there. Beginning meant alive, the end was dead. Art still a ways away, no liar. Beauty, an accident. Needs and wants bundled like twigs, then set on fire, except no fire. Candles had no wicks, fruit lacked seed, books bereft of plot, ornament and condiment were empty cisterns. There were pots. It was pure act, no motivation, consequence, imagination, sometimes a flare, a glow, a gleam, no questions asked, no revelation. And I was not yet capital I, still just an I. No mouth, no verb, no am to carry dark from day, dirt or sea from sky. God not God until one dove called out, where the hell's dry land? An answer formed, a raven shrugged and towed a line across the sand. Knew the sand, knew the vast notion of this long division, knew the understanding that this time there would be no revision. So of course, ultimately that's referencing the idea of the flood, which God said after the flood, I won't flood you anymore. I won't do that. It won't wipe things clean anymore. Now you gotta make a go of it. So I want to read, how are we doing out there? Just give me a nod, a thumbs up, an okay, okay. Great. I won't read forever. I can do this for a while, but I won't. I honestly, I tried to be judicious in my choices. This is called, this next poem is called In Re, looks like a memo, In Re, R-E colon. And this is, there's a little epigraph, which, you know, just I think probably amuses me. When my when my kids were little, we had a friend, they had a friend named Jack, and apparently Jack's mother said to me at some point that Jack at 4 years old turned to her quite alarmed and said, Duck, God. Like, Duck, like, you know, like get under the table, like, you know, and I just thought that's genius. That's some weird form of genius. Duck, God, like, did he mean ducks and God? Did he mean duck? There's God. That, you know, I mean, you know, I have no idea, but that's the epigraph to this. Duck, God. In Re the Ocean. And these are poems written actually in the voice of God, which it's interesting. There's a Jewish poet named Louise Glick, who wrote this whole book called The Wild Iris, and many of the poems were in the voice of God. And it was actually quite a revelation to me that you could do that you could have permission to do that. So it's kind of fun. So In Re the Ocean, you must admit it was inspired. At first, I thought the waves should go out, originating at some juncture in the sand. I considered lifting them up, completely vertical. Someone had the gall to call that heretical. Finally, I arrived at their present state, in constant arrival in tears, a series hemmed by white spume, white caps, a little ornament like the eye on the peacock's wing. I have an affection for frills. Some say they're all that. Eyebrows, cheekbones, attractive, curvature, ligature. What's so wrong with detail? At first, the sea had no qualities, no physics, and my archangels complained. I granted sound to Gabriel, taxed by the scales of justice, smell to Michael, wearied by cutting people slack all day, every day, with no reprieve, taste to Raphael, who claimed healing futile, and texture to Uriel, who rued illumination as too metaphorical. Not that I can't handle it, he said. Then I stood back. One must delegate. Our only debate over taste, as I resisted salt. Consider cinnamon or ginger, I said. What soothes can also be bitter, said my angel. I toyed with sky down, water up, but in Corral they protested on logistical grounds. As for depth, I took suggestions and decided beyond what they can fathom. I'm loath to tell whose idea that was. Let's just say he no longer works here. In Re the Balcony. Get a load of that view. There's Catalina Island, overpriced but worth it, a pledge of paradise coarsened slightly by the bicycle for rent. I can measure the length of the San Clemente Pier from here. How it bullies my water, gesturing to the waves, go round. There's always someone like that, pounding the gavel of self-interest. If I punished them all, there would be no time for diversions such as this moment. an immersion in lavender, which is not obsequious. The irony, these interruptions, their constructions contribute to the panorama, a tribute to horizon. How fortunate they realized perspective. They surprise me, particularly their eyes. Henry umbrellas. I take full credit, even for the truant ones strewn on streets after a storm, such triage. And those chaperoned by wind beckoned up, 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 their owners' hands abandoned, palms in supplication. I am infatuated with them. So they didn't rate the first 7 days. I knew someone would dream them up. Look at my palms, their fronds, their lines. Don't tell me Louis Parapluie never saw a palm. One only needs so much imagination, what with allusion and translation. Do I need to draw you a map? My favorites have handles with scepters and abundant domes. And the last in this series, Henry Sand. It's not mine, but I should have seen it coming. The gradual pulverizing, you know, eventually it will all disappear, as will you. I did not mean for everything to get smaller. I did not mean for the rich richer and the poor poorer, nor for everything to be fair, though my translators bandy about justice and righteousness with abandon, as though words were meant to correlate to thoughts, as though ideas matter and things matter. Do dunes compensate? I did not invent intent. You did. And the way indented footprints disappear on the ocean's arrival, that was yours too. How eloquent. So I'm going to move on to some a couple of poems. Just keep an eye on the time from my last book. Beth, we doing okay? Okay, great. This poem is called Divided. Hold on 1 second.
Patty, do you need my copy? Need me to run it over the house?
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just come straight over.
I was just I was just asking my husband.
Wow, you're such a teacher's pet.
I've done it's really, I'll be right there. This is called Divided, and it's from my second book, which is called Mechanical Cluster. And just for a little FYI, the way I got the title for this book is that I was going through a car wash with my husband, and I was reading my user's manual. This is before there were phones that you could be, you know, like be bored on your phone, you know, so you just, and I didn't have any books with me. It was kind of crazy. So I opened the glove compartment. I'm sitting in a car wash and I started reading the user's manual of my car. And this epigraph from the entire book is from my Ford Probe user's manual. In your vehicle, the warning lights and gauges are grouped together on the instrument panel. We call this grouping a cluster. Your vehicle has a mechanical cluster. And I thought, that's a great title, Mechanical Cluster. I said, there's some great copywriters working at Ford Motor Company, as my brothers used to call growing up, Ford's Motor Company when it was privately owned. So anyway, that's where the title for this book came from. This poem is called Divided. It is hard to explain the light here. This poem, let me interrupt myself. I've had, as Beth mentioned, I'm not from here, I'm from Detroit. I've lived in New York and Chicago and Houston. And all through my life, I used to have people say to me all the time, why do you live in California? Which was always sort of interesting. Why did you move to California? Which was always sort of fascinating to me. Why does anybody, move anywhere? So this poem is, besides the fact that it's the most beautiful place in North America to live, but aside from that, why do you live in California? So this is a response to that called Divided. It is hard to explain the light here, earnest and aerobic light, not the complacent kind. It gets fired up by the ocean and believes in its own ability to reinvent the vapid into the vatic, the sore, serene, torpor to fever, temblor and squall to static. I know you have light in other places. I have lived in other places and found curb to pole star endearing. What can I say? Everywhere, dawn wears its mantle of emblem, cueing insomniac, paperboy, baker. Here in these fringe towns yoked by Coast Highway and the old mission route, El Camino Real, we awaken neither more beautiful nor more true. But the light brings the possible on particle, seducing the muscles and liquids of your eye. The possible weighs little, tastes like coriander or thyme, and resembles its sister, the probable, whose features are more sharply defined, whose finest hour is dusk. So I haven't gotten to read this poem. I haven't had the opportunity to read this poem for a long time. When I first moved here, the person before I joined Temple Bat Yam, I belonged to a synagogue called Temple Beth David up in Westminster because I knew the cantor very well. The cantor actually married Eric and I, cantor Lisa Charlin, and I was in the choir there. And so this poem is called Choir Rehearsal, 7 p.m. There's a poet reference in here named Elizabeth Bishop, and said she's referred to throughout her life, even by people who knew her, as Miss Bishop. So I reference her in this poem. Choir Rehearsal, 7 p.m. From beaches, Huntington, Newport, and Long, from island, peninsula, ranch, and mesa, we venture inland to Westminster, to Beth David, House of David. Clear story views and 40 wooden pews, after the anointed who calmed Saul with harp and song. Please come singing, says our cantor. Please come ready to sing. In the room behind the holy scrolls, the Ner Tamid, the stained glass parables, robes and closets smooth their voluptuous folds, and 2 rows of chairs unbend at the waist. The cantor lifts her slender arms to let us know it's time, rein in our transgressions, keep our pitch in tow. Few miles west, the ocean cues a coda in its cannon, high notes cresting white. The waves are running in verses, says Miss Bishop, who is usually right. Nearby the 405, syncopated friction of wheels on unseen stripes, horn riff, muffler, radio siren, tire bursting, seams alarm, squeak and squeal, they fill our fermata with the gush of chance music, like the stones struck by Moses' staff, giving forth more water than the Hebrews could imbibe. Too much or not enough. Water, manna, quail, love, money, time. 6 days of work, 1 of rest, 6 of toil, 1 of singing, to keep the excess damned at bay, to separate on our minor scale light from dark, as we are makers of list and label, phylum and genera, branch, strain, and fable, to explain what exists outside the world we contain. Recall the old scholar who, while he prayed, could not be taken by the angel of death. Said angel cast a stone in his path. The man tripped, gasped, his chant abated, and the angel, riding the broad brim of his hat, made his move, invaded. Would that we could stave him off. Sea and freeway hem us in. Unless our notes reach up, they'll be consumed like Pharaoh's soldiers in the Red Sea's folds. Please come singing, says the cantor. Please come ready to sing. Listen, not for deliverance, not for wind, rain, footfalls, or forgiveness from sin, but for the still small voice in each imperfect hymn. Beth, 5 minutes? Am I okay?
Beautiful. Yeah, I think we've got about 5 more minutes, and then we'll open it up to any questions that we may have. And
Sounds
that'd be
good.
wonderful. Thank
All
you.
right, I'm going to read 2 more poems, I think, in that 5 minutes. This is called No, I'm the Mother. And my best poetry friend grew up in the northern coastal town of Maine. Speaking French was her first language, French Canadian. And we met when in graduate school. And she's quite wonderful, a wonderful poet. And apparently, and an entirely Catholic, very, very poor town. Apparently they did Fiddler on the Roof when she was in high school. So they just said they're so, and I asked her about it, and you know, it was quite remarkable, as you might imagine. Not a Jew for hundreds of miles, really. Fiddler on the Roof in Fort Kent, Maine. So this is sort of referencing that. This is called No, I'm the Mother. And there's an epigraph from Stephen Sondheim, which I imagine I won't need to tell you what this is from. Say it soft and it's almost like praying. So, all right, it's West Side Story, just in case you're having a little glitch there. Say it soft and it's almost like pray. Okay, Sondheim. No, I'm the mother. I did want to ask if the Mariners Christian School production of Fiddler on the Roof had a Jewish advisor friend, if there were a practicing Jew anywhere near when the sweet children were learning to collect spit in their throats, when pronouncing what would otherwise be a crunchy, cheerful ch. My best friend, whom I have never been mad at, never, as naysayers like to say, well, that's a very long time, grew up in a border town in northern Maine, Catholic, speaking French. And there was one Jewish family represented for our purposes by one Jew, Harry Eskovitz. Harry Eskovitz. Harry Eskovitz. Harry's father, Jacob, potato farmer and owner of Valley Motors. Everyone's uncle bought their Chevys there. Harry asked to consult on their production, and I am certain he did a fine job, accepting what could not be changed, the Eastern European darkness, hard to imitate, irony in the marrow, hard to teach, a shrug. And so they did accept his guidance, pretending to be poor, they were, and hungry, they were. So it's possible not much acting was required, but Harry taught them the countenance of Jews who leave and settle and leave, resigned, bemused. Though sometimes when rehearsing the scene, when Cossacks destroy the wedding, boys raise their fists, almost forgetting. They passed very well. And one kid studied the violin, brought in from Presqu'Isle, sewing up his titular role. His parents took a roll of Polaroids each night. My friend, Seitel, was the best. Her head of hair belongs on stage with her defined face, gray eyes, and she can actually sing, though you might have to cajole her a little. In our locale, near a border diagonal and thousands of miles away, decades intervening, I buy my son a cocoa and a cruller, which happens to be my favorite word. It is Dutch and German. They eat them on Shrove Tuesday to use up fat before Lent, and the French have their own version, fluted, made from pastry dough, a tasty architecture. It's very light, I tell him. He turns it over, perplexed. His hair, a combination of sand and wave. His eyes, green-gray, blue-gray, green-blue, fair. If needed, he could pass. My grandmother in her grave shifts. My hair, bark brown with white encroaching roots, curly on a good day, often diffuse. The denizens of this donut store up at dawn to tend dough and filling look at him, at me, at him, at me, at. Now they tire of wondering. Already, I tire of the century. though we are so near the beginning. And I have to remind myself of Harry Escovitz, of friendship, desert, of the earnest attempts, how they are not so bad. Beth, one short poem, and we'll take questions.
One more should be great.
All right. I think I'm going to read this poem called Moisha Midrash. You know, do you ever read how there are people see, I always envy this, kind of like the Virgin Mary and a tortilla, you know, you hear about this, you know, or in sort of in different, and I always envy those, like, dang, that would be cool. So that's where this beginning of this poem comes from, Moisha Midrash. Why don't we see Moses in a glacial crevasse, or a chrysanthemums in fluorescence, or the shiny door handle of a new sedan, or in a half honeydew after the scoop seeds? What we've got here is a failure of imagination, better or worse than failure to communicate. I cast my vote for Paisley. That's where you can see the face of whatever god or prophet you like. The design employs the Buddha, resembling a twisted teardrop of Persian origin. Some say a Zoroastrian symbol of life and eternity, bent cedar, the tree Zarathustra planted in paradise, and a sign of strength and resistance and modesty. I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue, Moses told God, which is really his way of saying, you should probably choose someone else. God ignored him for a while, but later told him, hit that rock and we'll blame the act and say, now you can't cross over into the promised land. Then you can stay here and stop making speeches and get some rest. Everyone's an actor. And Moses made a show of crying out and told the people, I should have asked the rock, but in his heart was relieved. Thank you all. Thank you for listening.
Oh, Patty, thank you so much. It was so enjoyable. So I think what we want to do for the next few minutes, we do have another online program for our residents who are joining us today on our in-house channel. So we're going to open it up for a few questions. And again, I'd like to thank everyone who signed on today. I know Allison Pinsky was on. We've got the Nefs that are signed on, and I think I'll touch Shelley and myself. We have all the presidents. I feel like we ought to stand up and salute. We've got Heather Klein from Federation, and of course our own Jody Greenbaum from Heritage Pointe, and then the kudos. We have the wonderful Scott Siegel, Rob Greenfield, and of course Patty, past presidents of Temple Bat Yam. So thank you so much. And who would like to go first here? Who do we have? Let's take a look.
Question.
Just raise your hand. Rob Greenfield, if you want to unmute yourself. Rob, do you want to unmute yourself? There you go.
I did. So Patty, was always amazing. Just every time you open up your mouth, it's great. And the funny thing about poetry, it's so mesmerizing that you almost want to say, what did you say in the beginning? And so I think when I'm listening to poetry, not necessarily reading it, I mean, how can we unpack poetry for the unpoetic people like myself, that the structure of poetry, like how is it best to approach a poem? Because I also find that the descriptions are so numerous that a lot of times you're trying to continue to keep track of the subject matter. It's different than reading a book, obviously. So for the novice, is there any reference or guide or something that we could use so when we do read poetry and approach it, we kind of do it in a little analytical way so we could also evaluate it?
Well, I think it can help. Listening is, of course, different than, reading. And listening, even when I'm giving readings, it's a different sort of mandate. Like when I'm giving a reading, there's a performance element to it. And, so over Zoom, that's even, of greater importance. When you're reading a poem, in a book or online, I think it's important, first thing is to sort of let yourself off the hook. Because one of the reasons why people are scared of poetry is that nobody wants to not get it, and everybody, we're adults, we're, working, we're professionals, we've accomplished X or Y in our lives. So people, I think, are worried that they're not going to get it. And that immediately kind of puts up a guard. Like, what if I don't get it? Then, then it's me. And it's not actually, it's the poet's job to reach out to the reader. But I also think you're right that as a reader, it is part of your job when you're reading a poem. It's different than reading a billboard. It's different than reading it's different than reading even a nice little piece of popular fiction, which of course can be a very soothing and positive experience. You have to be open to not getting everything. And in a way, you have to sort of look for your own points of entry. Like, oh, I like that part. I like that, And I tell my students, look for points of entry. Don't just kind of reject that sense of kind of potential alienation. Like, what do you like about this? I also reading it aloud for yourself can be very meaningful. As you read it out loud, you sort of realize where the poet punctuated. I'm a big punctuator. I'm a lover of punctuation. I always say to my students, like, get over that you think punctuation is like bourgeois and patriarchal. Punctuation is about clarity, like calm down. Punctuation is like, it's literally saying to the reader, here's what's important. Here's where you breathe. Here's how long you breathe. Here's what matters. So I think when you read a poem aloud for yourself, it actually helps you sort of enter the voice of the poet, and that can be really helpful. So I don't, it's not easy. And some of what I assign, I look back and I think, oh, that's really hard. And then my students, they find their point of entry. Oh, I thought this was interesting. I thought this was cool. So I think that point of entry is going to be different for everybody,
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Anyone else?
Quick one, really. Some of your themes, I've heard some of your poetry and some of it was new. And some of the themes are to be expected because I know you well.
Mhm.
But one of the ones that I heard today that I didn't recognize from before and is kind of surprising to me in the way I know you is about the technicalities of science and flora and like
Mhm.
those kinds of things I never really heard before. So are you a frustrated scientist and biologist? And also there's an irreverence that I heard today, which actually really suits you.
Right.
I hear that and I'm like, oh yeah, that's her. But those are two separate things, but that's kind of what I heard today. One wasn't surprising and one was.
It's interesting for me. I have I do not I don't have a scientific background. I'm not comfortable, with I've never been that good at the sciences, but the internet has sort of made research so much easier, that if I see a flower, I was hiking somewhere and somebody said to me, and I was with a friend and I said, what is that? And I said, oh, that's a ghost flower. Oh, okay, cool. Went home, looked up the ghost flower, and started to sort of, and actually, I love the language of science. I actually love the language of mathematics. And I remember many years ago, Scientific American, the magazine, made the editorial decision to, I'll put this kindly because I include myself in this new readership, to dumb down, so that people could understand Scientific American who were not scientists, and from that point on, I used to say to my students, get a subscription to Scientific American. You're going to find so much gorgeous metaphorical language that you're going to be able to import into your poems, like the language of science and math of the natural world is so beautiful and is so interesting and weird. So there have been points in my poetry when I've been really invested in that, and other times, more recently, when I was writing more about my mother and mortality, where I was sort of less invested in that. So because that more recent work, Heather, you haven't heard that as much, but there's always times that I think, oh, that's a great tree, you know, like the pepper, even the pepper tree poem, you know, and I'm just sort of get fascinated with it. And I love learning those little pockets of information. It actually makes people think I'm more erudite than I am, because I really don't have a broad scientific knowledge. I have a very spotty, so like I've learned very little pockets of things, like, cool, I know everything about the ghost flower, you know, but you know, but so that's, as far as the irreverence goes, yeah, that's my conversation, my ongoing, as you know, my ongoing conversation with God is sort of, I figure as long as I'm in a dialogue, I'm okay. You know, that, you know, I'm not always respectful. Yes, Frank.
Yeah, as a scientist and a physician, I have two comments. I've thought your description in many cases of nature is what I saw. I didn't see it as science. I saw it as good observations of what's going on out there. I've written very little nature poems, but I think I'm going to take a crack at it. And secondly, your poems seem to be in a lot of them were nature oriented, and I think they were very, very, very nice, very moving. And you also had what I would call a very large number of poetic memoirs, commentaries on various things. And your comments there about science really touched me, because I recently wrote a poem on astrophysics that is called about, that seeks to describe how modern therapy has changed so much, and what we've learned about it. And so the third comment I have is really striking about the Jewish kid in the Catholic area. I'm a Catholic and grew up Catholic, and grew up in an Irish, Italian neighborhood where everybody fought, and my family was Belgian, and we were peacekeepers. But the point was, is one family, only one on the whole block, was Jewish. And so it was very revelatory to think about what you were saying, and because it very much matches my experience from 60, 70 years ago now, and how the Jewish family interacted with us. They did very well. They invited us to bar mitzvahs. I was crazy about the daughter of one of them, you know. The boy was integral to everything we did. And so I really, really liked that poem. It was really got me there.
Thank you so much. You know, it's fun. I appreciate that. I like that poem too. And it's when I first met my friend, she so that in 1992, and she told her mother, you know, about me, you know, just because we became very good friends. And she told my mother told her mother I was Jewish. And her mother said, well, if Patty comes to visit, you know, we could arrange for her to meet Harry Eskovitz. You know, so they were ready to make the connection. I was like, it's okay. You know, she's like, I think it's all right. You know, for me, it really did happen when my husband's not Jewish and my kids are both sort of fair. And so there would be times when I would be out with one of my children that I could keep people thinking like, you know, see people thinking like, is she the babysitter? Is she the stepmom? Is she the, you know, so as they grew older, they start to look more like you, but then they were very fair. And you know, so anyway, thank you, Frank. Appreciate it.
Well, see, it's interesting because I'm Catholic and this beautiful, intelligent lady is Jewish.
She's gorgeous, I admit, you know.
So we have continual interactions, and part of the good part of the pandemic was we got to know each other a lot better. Part of the bad part of the kind of pandemic was you got to know each other.
I knew you were going to say that. Well, I just wanted to say that it was a particular treat to hear poetry read by its creator. It really was wonderful. And I just very quickly wanted to ask you, because some people write poetry, such as Frank, without guidance from others. And I was curious, as a professor, is there kind of a science to teaching poetry to your students?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a science, but it is more technical than you would think. You know, people tend to think, I've had friends over the years say like, how do you really grade? Can you really grade a poem? Yeah, I can grade a poem. You know, I mean, it's always sort of, people are always surprised that, you know, there's certain techniques that you're teaching, and there's some of those techniques involve, you know, casually, I might say, how to get out of your own way. Can I get over the idea? Oh my God, I have to write a poem. I have to produce a poem. Some of those techniques are about idea generation, how to find ideas. Some of them are more technical, how to enhance content and musicality and make them work together, you know, form and content. So there is somewhat of, it's more technical than you would think. By this point, I've been doing it long enough that it's pretty much on gut. You know, I know what to do, but I'm always learning new ways of teaching and new approaches. And even as we teach online now, there's things that I'm doing that I wouldn't have done a year ago. You know, there's things I can't do, honestly, that I would have done. I used to have students memorize poems. Now I don't, because I have no way of actually knowing if they're memorizing the poem, you know, so memorize and recite the poem, you know, and, you know, and the point of memorizing is really to sort of, there's a lot of usefulness, actually, there's a lot of utility to it, but I can't do that online. But then there are other things I can do online, and you just accept the trade-offs. I mean, my students at Cal State Long Beach are remarkable. So I'm very lucky. You know, so yeah, but thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Patty, we are so lucky to have you, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do this at another time,
love it.
maybe post-pandemic, when we can have you come to Heritage Point and see you in person. And I know our residents would really love that, be able to do that. So we're getting close to that 4 o'clock hour. Our residents have another program that they're going to watch, and so Shelley and I are going to wrap this up. And I just want to thank again everyone for coming and participating today. This was just a wonderful way to spend Sunday afternoon. So Heritage Point has been fortunate to have a number of these programs, and our own Rob Greenfield and his son were our last program. We've got some wonderful programs that we're going to bring to you in the spring, which we'll be announcing shortly. And I do want to say that if you don't have it on your calendar, and a lot of Temple Bat Yam people here, our invitations are going to be coming out this week, and we have registration open online that we will be honoring Jackie and Mel Lipson as a Lifetime Achievement honorees Sunday, February 28th. And that'll be a fully recorded program on YouTube, so we hope that you will be able to join us. And I'm going to throw it back to Shelley, and thank you all so much.
All right. So thank you, Beth, and thank you everyone for coming. I feel so uplifted after listening to Patty for a while. It really, you know, you made my day. So, and before I go, I just want to say, you know, Passover is only 9 weeks away, since you've got your calendars open. And since we're all sharing, I just wanted to let you know of another opportunity to leave you kind of stress-free and uplifted, and it's called Passover at the Point. So this is a way to experience Passover like you've never had it before. Look, the kids are not going to get in an airplane and fly cross country for Seder this year. We know this. That's all right. So we're going to give you the opportunity to enjoy it in the comfort and care of Heritage Point. You don't have to make the charoset. You don't have to change out your dishes. You know, this is Pesadica cuisine, full service experience and daily programming to enjoy Passover without all of the hassle. So all the meals are made in our Passover kitchens at Heritage Point, and everything is custom prepared and delivered to your guest suite. Yes, you could stay at Heritage Point. So, and you don't have to sit at the kids' table. That's also a plus. So this is a safe and senior only way to just test drive senior living. So if you're interested in Passover at the Point, either for Passover only or just to test drive senior living, let's talk. You can go on our website, you can go on our Facebook, you can call us, whatever way, reach out to us and we'll give you all the details. I also want to thank, before I forget, there's a religious school at Temple Bat Yam, since we were talking about Bat Yam earlier, and the kids at the JCAL program, the religious school program, are also doing a collaborative program this week with us for Tu B'Shvat and raising money to plant a tree for Tu B'Shvat. So we just want to do a shout out to them and thank them. So if you, again, take a moment, if you want to support the good work at Heritage Pointe, all you have to do this week is text the word trees to 345-345. And that's how you can support Heritage Pointe. So again, thank you everyone, and stay safe, and hope to see you in real life soon.
Bye,
Thank you all.
everyone.
Very soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, Patty.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Stay well. Stay safe.